Chapter 2 notes, finding the slope between 2 points. We've been spending a lot of time on slope this chapter because that's kind of the main topic with the linear equation. And today we're going to learn how to find the slope between 2 points. When I don't have a graph, I don't have a table, all I'm given is 2 points. So my points will look like this. Okay, and we often label the first point x1, y1, and the second point x2, y2. So it might look something like what you see right below in the first example, where I have just given me 2 sets of coordinates and I want to find the slope in between them. Okay. Remember that slope is the change in y over the change in x. So one way to find the change in something is to subtract the 2 values to find the difference between them. So that's what we're going to do. Using our 2 points, I'm going to subtract the y values on the top of this slope fraction, because that's the change in y. And what we usually do in math is we take the second point and subtract the first. So I'm going to subtract what we say y2 minus y1. The key here is that it's the y coordinate of each point is getting subtracted on the top in the numerator. For the change in x, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do it with the x values. So I'm going to take x2 and subtract x1. Okay. One of the key parts of this finding slope is that whatever point you start with when you subtract the y's, you have to start with that same point when you subtract the x's. That's why, if you look carefully, this second point is right here. Okay. I started with that green outline point in the numerator and the denominator of that fraction. Okay. And then I solve that, evaluate it, and that will give me my final answer, which will be the slope. And we can reduce it if it's possible to reduce it. So let's try this first example. Find the slope of the line through 3, 4, and 5, 1. So this point would be x1, y1. And this point would be x2, y2. So following my equation, which is change in y over change in x, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, I simply plug the numbers in. So y2 is 1, y1 is 4, so I'm going to take 1 minus 4. And then for my second, to the denominator, I'm going to take x2, which is 5, and subtract x1, which is 3. Okay, so notice the 1 and the 5 come from the second point, the 4 and the 3 come from the first, and we always subtract. Okay, so now I do the numerator first. 1 minus 4 is negative 3. So here's where you have to be good at adding and subtracting integers. That's why we practiced it for so long. And then 5 minus 3 is 2. So my slope is negative 3 over 2. So out of all the skills that we learned in this chapter, this is probably the one kids have the most difficulty with. There's a lot of steps to it, and it gets confusing. And sometimes, we forget to start with the same point in the numerator and the denominator both times. Sometimes we don't do the adding and subtracting of the integers correctly. So this is something that takes a little time to get good at, and you want to kind of pay attention and practice. Let's do another example. I want to find the slope of the line through 1, 5, and 2, 7. Again, this is be x1, y1, and x2, y2. So remember, to find the slope, I want to subtract the y's on top and the x's on the bottom. So y2 is 7, y1 is 5, so 7 minus 5. And then x2 is 2, x1 is 1. So the y's are on top, the x's are on the bottom. Now I just do the subtraction. 7 minus 5 is 2, 2 minus 1 is 1. And it is legal to simplify that to just be 2. Okay, so keep in mind as we continue, we're trying to find the slope, and The way we find it is to try to find the change in y and divide it by the change in x. And we find the change by subtracting the y values and subtracting the x values. Okay, so example number 3. Find the slope of the line between -1, 7 and 2, -2. Here's where it gets fun, because now I have some negative signs in the points. This, you just need to be careful. Take your time. Don't rush this. So remember, this is x1, y1, and this is x2, y2. I'm just writing those above those points to keep them straight. If that helps you could do that too. So remember, I'm going to take y2 and subtract y1, and then x2 minus x1. Now, here's where we have to be careful about the negative signs. So y2 is -2, and y1 is 7. x2 is 2, but x1 is -1. But I still am going to subtract that -1. Okay? So just keep that in mind. When we're doing slope, we always subtract. Okay? It's always subtraction. If the x or y value has a negative sign, we just include that in the equation. Now, in the numerator, on the top of the fraction, we have -2 minus 7, which is -9. In the denominator, we have minus a negative. And remember, when we're subtracting, one thing we could do is add the opposite. So I could change these two plus the plus. That's only when they're both negative. So it ends up being 2 plus 1 is 3. 9 divided by 3, -9 divided by 3 is -3. That's my slope. So this situation where I had to do the 2 minus -1, this is one of the places where kids get confused. Just remember, when you're subtracting a negative, that's the same as adding. Okay? Our fourth example, this is probably as hard as we can make it. You'll notice that every single x and y in our 2 points is negative. Okay? So we just need to be careful. We're still going to sorry, it's x1, y1, x2, y2. Remember, we are still going to subtract. Okay? That's always the case, but we just need to be careful of the negative signs. So, y2 is -9, and I'm going to subtract y1, which is -4. And I made that negative sign really large. And on the bottom, I'm going to do x2, which is -7, and I'm going to subtract -3. So now, remember, when we're subtracting a negative, I can change that to adding the opposite, which turns them both into addition. So now it's -9 plus 4, which is -5, and -7 plus 3, which is -4. A negative divided by a negative is positive, so I should simplify that to 5/4. So one thing to keep in mind here, you are always subtracting when you're finding the slope. Be careful about plugging in negative numbers. Keep the negative sign with the number. And if we end up with subtracting a negative, we can turn that into addition by adding the opposite. And just take your time and be careful. You'll get better at this with practice.